Question: how do you know that you are awake right now? Where really lies the distinction between a dream and waking life? And how do you know that the entirety of your own existence is not merely chimerical? Such questions lie at the heart of the play Life is a Dream by renowned Spanish playwright Pedro Calderón de la Barca. Now, if you don't know who that is, Pedro Calderón de la Barca was essentially kind of the Spanish Shakespeare. Indeed, I believe that he was a contemporary of William Shakespeare, and this is pretty much his magnum opus, his lasting contribution to world literature. The play Life is a Dream. Now, this work is, if nothing else, highly intriguing, or at least it was to me, because at its heart, this play is basically a philosophical thought experiment about the nature of reality and the questions that it raises, and how one is really supposed to distinguish between reality or fantasy. Now, the plot of Life is a Dream involves a prince named Sigismund who is imprisoned in a tower by his father. Indeed, Prince Sigismund has lived his entire life in a tower. He has never known anything outside of his prison. In a way, this is kind of reminiscent of Plato's allegory of the cave, about people who live their entire life in a prison of some sort and eventually escape, only to not really know what to make of what they find outside. But Prince Sigismund was imprisoned by his father, King Basilius, because on the day of his birth, not only did his mother die in childbirth, but he was born, you could say, under a bad sign. And his father, the king, who is also an astrologer, had kind of a premonition of doom and destruction that his young son would bring if he ever was allowed to take the crown for himself. The stars foretold it, you could say. And so he had his son locked away in a tower immediately, never to be let out. However, now in his old age, the king is kind of having an attack of conscience, and also he doesn't really have an heir because his wife died giving birth to Sigismund. And so he decides he's going to give it a go. He is going to let Sigismund out of his imprisonment in the tower and allow him to assume the rulership for himself briefly on a trial run kind of thing, and see how it goes. And if it goes badly and he turns out to be the monster that he kind of was led to believe that he would become, then they're going to do something very interesting. They're going to knock the prince out and take him right back to his cell in the tower, and they will tell him upon awakening that it was all a dream and that he never left the tower at all. And this is the question at the heart of Life is a Dream, and one that it wrestles with so interestingly. So, they let Prince Sigismund out, and he is a total dick, and he does some really bad stuff. So they're like, you're gonna burn the whole place down around our ears if we let you actually become king permanently. So they're like, lock his ass back up in the tower. And once he awakens back in the tower, he is indeed led to believe that it was all just a dream, that he was never the king at all, but had only dreamed that he was. And so the rest of the play is him kind of pondering the distinction, the nature of dreams and actual reality, and where that distinction may or may not lie, until eventually he is freed by kind of a seditious element of his father's kingdom, who believe that it is wrong to keep the prince locked up, and they want him to overthrow his father. And so this leads to kind of a climactic battle scene at the end of the play, in which the doom and destruction which the old king foresaw initially on the day of Sigismund's birth is brought about directly because of the actions of the king. It's one of those self-fulfilling prophecy kind of stories, which is really neat as well, and adds another layer to this work. But in the end, Sigismund realizes that, yeah, he was kind of a tool, and he vows to do better and be more virtuous and upright, and then earn his spot as the king, and so it kind of ends happily ever after. In fact, the ending was kind of the weakest point, but I'll get to that. But as I said, at the center of this work is the question of dreaming and how one is supposed to know whether they are indeed awake or whether they are dreaming, and how one is supposed to conduct themselves regardless. Now, the question of dreaming is one that has kind of been at the heart of philosophical debate for a long time. It is a very kind of hotly debated question because it raises other questions about perception, about the role of our senses in, delineating what is real, and lots of other things that kind of bleed over into neuroscience, I guess. But uh, anyone who has had a dream, I guess, can probably attest that it can be really hard to know the difference between when you're awake and when you're dreaming, because dreams have a logic all their own, don't they? I mean, that's why it's called dream logic. And while occasionally you can, have lucid dreams where you are fully aware that what you're experiencing is not quote unquote real, but those are very rare. And most of the time when you're dreaming, you think at that time that it's real. Because again, dreams operate on a system of logic that's all their own. And also, and as anyone who has ever had a dream of any great detail can probably tell you, time does not work the same in dreams as it does in waking life, does it? I mean, you can wake up at like 5 o'clock in the morning and be like, oh, I've got an hour before I have to get up, and then you can go back to sleep and dream entire scenarios that are incredibly elaborate and span great deals of time, like days and weeks, and only to wake up and only have a couple of minutes have passed, because time doesn't work the same way in the realm of Morpheus as it does in waking life, does it? But that raises even more questions about what really is real and what is not. But another issue at the heart of life as a dream is how to conduct oneself morally and righteously when you don't know that what you're experiencing is the true reality. Um, Sigismund, whenever he is initially made king temporarily, he completely messes it up because he has no concept of morality really, and he just treats people like toys, and he's kind of just drunk off his own power. But what the other characters in the play tell him over and over is, you better act right because you might wake up and this all has only been a dream, which is what ostensibly does happen to him. But he doesn't heed that warning initially until after he is freed the second time, and he is convinced that I need to behave in a righteous manner because this could all be a dream, but it might actually be real. And that is kind of the far-reaching issue of this, because it calls into question certain aspects of religion as well as our lives, just all of us. Because life is the title of this play kind of, implies life is a dream. And, according to most major religions, life kind of is a dream because it is temporary and it's only a prelude to greater or worse things after death, and death kind of being viewed as an awakening, is the awakening from the dream to the true reality, which is what you will experience after waking up or dying. But if we view life itself like what we take to be real life, but then again that also calls into question what really is real life, because if we consider, in a religious sense, that life itself is kind of just basically analogous to a dream because it's just a prelude to something far more long lasting afterwards, then what does that make of actual dreams, like the things that we have when we sleep? I mean, what does that actually make of that, and where exactly is reality truly defined? But if we, take that, if we say that life is a dream, more or less, for all intents and purposes, then how are you supposed to behave? Because with like the major religions, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, they're very moral, and their teachings are that you should live a certain way. But the thing is, if you're dreaming, how do you behave then? Because you don't know when reality will actually kick in. As Sigismund is told in the play, you need to act rightly and you need to be just, because this could all be a dream and you could wake up to something vastly worse based on your conduct here in the dream. So even if you're dreaming, like seriously dreaming, like while you're asleep, does your conduct then have any ramifications? Does it have any consequence? And so it's all just kind of very cerebral, but it's presented in such a simple and kind of moralistic way that it really just kind of keeps you pondering. It really does. And I guess that is why this play is considered one of the greatest ever written, because it offers so much food for thought. And it does it in, again, kind of just this quaint little way that masquerades as a story about an imprisoned prince trying to, become the king, and kind of butting heads with his father. But it's all, like I said, just kind of heady, really. And it calls into question so many aspects of what we take to be real and what we should take to be real and how we should act, even if we're unsure. We should always act morally and in a virtuous manner, even if what we're experiencing may not be real at all, because there may be consequences because of it. Now, as to the criticisms of this work, the ending was a major letdown. So at the end of the play, Sigismund is convinced that he's like, okay, if I'm going to be king, I have to act rightly, because what I'm experiencing right now might just be a dream again. But he's like, I'm going to do right this time, and I'm not going to make people hate me. But at the end of the play, it's all just kind of wrapped up with a bow on top a little bit too conveniently. And the guard, that's the thing that seems to be kind of perplexing to a lot of people who read this work, is what Sigismund does at the end of the play to the soldier who initially freed him the second time from his confinement, and enabled him to go on the campaign that he does towards the end, enabled him to actually become king in real life again, because the whole point of the thing is you don't know what real life actually is. But the soldier who freed Sigismund in turn gets imprisoned in the very tower that Sigismund was imprisoned in for his efforts. And a lot of people don't understand that, and it's certainly kind of a eyebrow raising ending to the work. But I think it's a political commentary, because Pedro Calderon de la Barca was a pretty conservative writer who was very loyal to the crown. And so I think as I'm given to understand it, the point of that is that he is illustrating that people need to uphold the rule of whatever monarch they are under, because there are consequences to not doing so, I think. So the ending to modern readers doesn't really make a lot of sense in a moral kind of way, or it doesn't appear to. And as well, it's just kind of convenient. But other than that, this play is a really good work. It's pretty brief. I read this in virtually no time at all. But it does pack a punch. And again, it leaves you pondering, as with the best of these kind of stories, like Christopher Nolan's Memento, or Christopher Nolan's Inception. It leaves you wondering what is actually real. And so even after you read it, you're just kind of like, am I dreaming? Am I awake right now? Because again, because dreams operate on their own system of logic, they seem so convincing at the time that you're having them. And again, isn't life itself like that? I mean, life obeys certain laws, certain rules, but who's to say that upon dying, um, you wake up to find something even more, either better or worse, depending on what your beliefs are. How do you know that life itself isn't just a dream? And so that's really kind of the meat of this story. It lends a lot of thought to it. It lends an aura of thoughtfulness to it because, again, it keeps you thinking long after you finished it. And I really just enjoyed it. I really am glad that I read Life as a Dream. I think to rate it, I'm gonna give Life as a Dream an A minus. The ending was kind of a bummer. It did kind of crap out there a little bit towards the end. But overall, this is an immensely valuable work and one that I think a lot of people might get some good out of reading because it does make you think about what we take to be real and how we know things are real, or rather, how we don't know that things are real. And yeah, it's just a really neat work. I'm very glad that I read it, and I think this probably deserves its place, deserves its rank as one of the greatest plays ever written because it definitely gives you food for thought. So yes, Life is a Dream by Pedro Calderon de la Barca. Have you read Life is a Dream? If you have, let me know down in the comments what you thought about it, whether you have agreed or disagreed with anything I've said about it here today. And if you haven't read Life is a Dream, pick it up, give it a look. I mean, it's well in the public domain by now. It's 500 years old practically. So you can read it for free and it won't take you much time. But again, it gives you something to chew on, definitely. So, yeah, I would recommend it. And as always, if you have enjoyed anything you've seen or heard here today, remember to hit that like button, subscribe. I would really appreciate it. And until next time, peace.